Picture this. It's 1980, and instead of watching the news about the Iran hostage crisis or the Moscow Olympics boycott, you're seeing live footage of the first human colony being established on Mars. Sounds impossible? Well, what if I told you that we came closer to this reality than you ever imagined, and the only thing that stopped us was a decision made in a smoke-filled room that changed the course of human history forever? Welcome back to another mind-bending journey through the corridors of what almost was. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating alternate timelines that nearly became our reality. This isn't science fiction, folks. This is a story of how humanity almost took its first giant leap to another planet decades before SpaceX ever existed, and why a secret government program called Project Red Dawn was buried so deep that even today, most of the world has no idea how close we came to becoming an interplanetary species in the early 1980s. But before we launch into this incredible tale, I need you to do something for me. Look around your room right now. Notice the technology, the materials, the very air you're breathing. Now imagine if all that had been designed not for Earth, but for survival on a red, dusty world 140 million miles away. Because if things had gone differently in 1979, that might have been your reality right now. Your parents might have been Martian colonists, and you might have grown up watching Earth rise over the Martian horizon instead of the other way around. The story begins in 1976, just 2 years after the Watergate scandal rocked America to its core. The country was hungry for something that would restore national pride and demonstrate American technological superiority over the Soviet Union. The space race had seemingly ended with the Apollo missions, but behind closed doors, a small group of visionaries within NASA, the Department of Defense, and several aerospace contractors were already planning something that would make the moon landing look like a practice run. Dr. Jonathan Martinez was a propulsion engineer at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Unlike his colleagues who were focused on the space shuttle program, Martinez had his eyes set on something far more ambitious. He'd been quietly developing revolutionary ion drive technology that could cut the travel time to Mars from 9 months to just 4 months. But more importantly, he'd solved the radiation shielding problem that had plagued every previous Mars mission concept. Martinez's breakthrough came from an unexpected source, studying the magnetic fields of certain minerals found in meteorites. He discovered that by creating a specific crystalline structure using rare earth elements, he could generate a magnetic field strong enough to deflect cosmic radiation while using minimal power. This wasn't just a theoretical concept. He'd built working prototypes that were secretly tested in underground facilities in Nevada. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, Colonel Sarah Chun was leading a classified study on the strategic implications of establishing a permanent human presence on Mars. The Cold War was far from over, and Chen's team had calculated that whichever superpower first established a self-sustaining colony on Mars would have an insurmountable advantage in space-based military operations. The Red Planet would become the ultimate high ground. Chen's analysis was chilling in its clarity. The Soviet Union was already developing their own Mars program, codenamed Red Storm, and intelligence suggested they were planning to launch their first crewed mission as early as 1982. If America didn't act fast, the next phase of the Cold War would be fought not on Earth, but across the solar system, with Mars as the Soviets' forward operating base. The convergence of Martinez's technological breakthrough and Chen's strategic urgency created the perfect storm for Project Red Dawn. In the summer of 1977, a classified meeting took place at a nondescript office building in Arlington, Virginia. Present were Martinez, Chun, NASA Administrator Robert Frosch, Secretary of Defense Harold Brown, and 3 representatives from aerospace giants Lockheed, Boeing, and Rockwell International. What emerged from that meeting was the most ambitious space program in human history. Project Red Dawn would consist of 3 phases. First, an unmanned cargo mission would deliver essential supplies and equipment to Mars. Second, a crew of 12 specially selected astronauts would establish the initial colony. Third, regular supply missions would expand the colony to a self-sustaining population of 500 within 5 years. The timeline was aggressive beyond belief. Launch was scheduled for the optimal Earth-Mars transfer window in late 1980. giving the team just 3 years to develop, build, and test technology that was decades ahead of anything that officially existed. The budget was equally staggering. $85 billion in 1977 money, roughly equivalent to $400 billion today. This funding would come from a combination of NASA's budget, Department of Defense black projects, and contributions from allied nations who would receive guaranteed spots in the colony. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. The secrecy required for Project Red Dawn meant that it had to be completely isolated from NASA's public programs. While the world watched the space shuttle development, the real action was happening in underground facilities scattered across the American Southwest. Entire teams of engineers and scientists were relocated to these black sites. Their families told they were working on classified satellite projects. The human cost was enormous. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a brilliant astrobiologist who had been recruited to design the Mars habitat's life support systems, later described the psychological toll of working in complete isolation. Team members couldn't discuss their work with anyone outside the project, not even their spouses. Many developed severe depression and anxiety. 3 scientists suffered complete nervous breakdowns, and one, aerospace engineer David Kim, disappeared entirely in early 1979, sparking rumors that he'd been eliminated to protect project secrets. Despite these challenges, the technical progress was nothing short of miraculous. Martinez's team had perfected the ion drive system and successfully tested it on a scale model that could have powered a car. The radiation shielding worked flawlessly, providing protection equivalent to Earth's atmosphere, while adding less than 2 tons to the spacecraft's weight. Most remarkably, they developed a closed-loop life support system that could sustain 12 people indefinitely using nothing but Martian atmosphere and subsurface ice. The spacecraft itself was a marvel of engineering that wouldn't look out of place in a modern science fiction film. Named Ares 1, it consisted of multiple modules connected by flexible tunnels. The command section housed the crew during transit, while the habitat modules would be deployed on the Martian surface to create the initial colony. The entire structure was powered by a compact nuclear reactor that Martinez's team had miniaturized to the size of a shipping container. By early 1979, everything was falling into place. The 12 crew members had been selected and were undergoing intensive training at a facility in Utah that perfectly replicated Martian conditions. These weren't typical astronauts. They were chosen specifically for their ability to establish and maintain a permanent settlement. The team included engineers, doctors, geologists, botanists, and even psychologists trained in small group dynamics. The crew was led by Commander Rebecca Walsh, a former Navy test pilot who had logged more hours in experimental aircraft than any other person alive. Her second-in-command was Dr. Mikhail Petrov, a Soviet defector and rocket engineer whose insights into Soviet space capabilities were invaluable. The inclusion of Petrov was itself controversial, as many questioned whether a former Soviet citizen could be trusted with America's most classified space program. As 1979 progressed, public hints of something big began to surface. President Carter made several mysterious references to America's renewed commitment to space exploration, and NASA's budget requests included line items for technologies that wouldn't be needed for the space shuttle. Aviation Week published a cryptic article about new propulsion systems being tested in Nevada, though they had no idea how advanced the actual technology had become. But the Soviet Union was paying attention. Their intelligence network had detected unusual activity at several American aerospace facilities, and by mid-1979, they correctly deduced that the United States was developing a Mars program far more advanced than anything they'd publicly announced. The Soviet response was swift and dramatic. They accelerated their own Red Storm program and began preparing for a launch that would beat the Americans to Mars by mere months. This is where our story reaches its crucial turning point. In September 1979, a meeting was called at Camp David that would determine the fate of human civilization. Present were President Carter, National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, CIA Director Stansfield Turner, and the core leadership of Project Red Dawn. The topic: intelligence reports indicating that the Soviet Union was planning to launch their Mars mission in early 1981, potentially beating Red Dawn by several months. The debate that followed was heated and philosophical. Some argued that America should accelerate its own timeline, launching in 1980 regardless of the risks. Others believed that a hasty launch would be catastrophic, potentially resulting in the death of the entire crew and setting back Mars exploration by decades. But there was a third faction, led by Brzezinski, that proposed something far more radical. Brzezinski argued that a space race to Mars would inevitably lead to the militarization of the Red Planet. Two competing colonies, one American and one Soviet, would transform Mars into another front in the Cold War. The potential for conflict would be enormous, and the consequences of space-based warfare were unpredictable and terrifying. Instead, he proposed that America should abandon Project Red Dawn and work toward international cooperation in space exploration. The psychological warfare aspect was equally important. If the Soviet Union successfully established the first Mars colony, it would represent a propaganda victory that could shift global opinion in their favor for generations. Conversely, if America won the race but then faced ongoing conflict with a rival Soviet colony, the cost could outweigh any benefits. The decision was not just about exploring Mars. It was about the future of human civilization itself. President Carter, already facing criticism for his handling of the Iran hostage crisis and economic problems at home, found himself confronting perhaps the most consequential decision of the 20th century. The technical team assured him that Red Dawn could launch on schedule and had an excellent chance of success. The military argued that American strategic interests demanded reaching Mars first, but the diplomatic corps warned that a unilateral Mars mission could destroy any hope of international cooperation in space for decades. The discussion continued through the night, with each faction presenting compelling arguments. Martinez and his technical team had prepared detailed presentations showing how American Mars technology could be shared with allies, creating a truly international colony that would serve as a model for peaceful exploration. Chen's military analysis demonstrated how Mars could be kept demilitarized while still providing strategic advantages. But Brzezinski's warnings about unintended consequences resonated deeply with a president already grappling with complexities of global leadership. As dawn broke over Camp David on September 23, 1979, President Carter made his decision. Project Red Dawn would be terminated immediately. All hardware would be dismantled or repurposed for other programs. The crew would be reassigned to conventional NASA missions. And most crucially, all records of the project would be classified at the highest levels for a minimum of 50 years. The official reason given to project personnel was budget constraints and shifting national priorities. Only the core leadership knew the real reason. Carter had decided that humanity's first steps on Mars should be taken together, not as part of competition that could poison humanity's relationship with space exploration forever. It was a decision that prioritized long-term cooperation over short-term advantage. The aftermath of this decision was swift and far-reaching. Dr. Martinez suffered a complete nervous breakdown when told his life's work will be destroyed. Commander Walsh requested immediate transfer to the shuttle program, later becoming one of the first female shuttle commanders. The Soviet Union, learning through their intelligence network that Red Dawn had been canceled, quietly abandoned their own Red Storm program, redirecting resources to their struggling space station efforts. But the most profound impact was on the trajectory of human space exploration. Without the pressure of Cold War competition, Mars exploration reverted to long-term planning rather than immediate action. The technologies developed for Red Dawn were gradually incorporated into civilian programs, but the revolutionary advances in propulsion and life support were diluted across multiple projects rather than focused on a single Mars mission. Some of the Red Dawn technologies did eventually surface in different forms. Martinez's ion drive principles were later used in deep space probes, though never on the scale originally envisioned. The radiation shielding technology found applications in nuclear power plants. The closed-loop life support systems became the foundation for the International Space Station's environmental controls. But the integrated system that could put humans on Mars in 1980 was broken apart and scattered across dozens of smaller projects. The crew members of Red Dawn went on to distinguished careers in conventional space exploration. Rebecca Walsh commanded 3 shuttle missions and later became deputy administrator of NASA. Dr. Petrov became a leading consultant on Soviet space technology and played a crucial role in the eventual cooperation that created the International Space Station. Several team members founded private aerospace companies that are today pushing the boundaries of commercial space exploration. But what if Carter had made a different decision? What if humanity had established its first Mars colony in 1981? The implications are staggering to contemplate. By now, we might have permanent cities on Mars with populations in the thousands. The technologies developed to sustain Martian life could have revolutionized environmental protection on Earth. The international cooperation required to maintain interplanetary colonies might have prevented some of Earth's most devastating conflicts. Alternatively, we might have seen the Cold War extend to Mars, with competing military installations and the constant threat of interplanetary conflict. The cost of maintaining rival colonies could have bankrupted both superpowers. And a disaster on Mars could have set back human space exploration by generations, making today's Mars mission seem impossibly dangerous. Recent discoveries have added new dimensions to this alternative history. When NASA's Mars rovers found evidence of subsurface water ice in precisely the location where Red Dawn planned to establish its colony, former project members realized how close they'd come to success. The site they'd selected based on 1970s orbital imagery and geological analysis turned out to be ideal for exactly the reasons they predicted. Even more intriguingly, declassified Soviet documents from the 1990s revealed that Red Storm was far more advanced than American intelligence had realized. The Soviets had developed their own revolutionary propulsion system and had actually built a functioning Mars habitat prototype. If both programs had continued, the space race to Mars might have been even closer than anyone imagined, with both superpowers launching within months of each other. The psychological profiles of the Red Dawn crew, recently declassified, provide fascinating insights into how humanity might have adapted to life on another world. The team had been selected not just for technical competence, but for their ability to maintain mental health in extreme isolation and to work collaboratively under intense stress. These same psychological principles are now being applied to modern Mars mission planning and long-duration space exploration. Today, as private companies and government agencies around the world race to establish the first human presence on Mars, the lessons of Project Red Dawn remain relevant. The technical challenges that Martinez and his team solved in the 1970s using slide rules and early computers are being tackled again with modern technology. But the fundamental questions about international cooperation, military implications, and the long-term consequences of human expansion into space remain as complex as ever. The story of Project Red Dawn reminds us that history is shaped not just by what happens, but by what almost happens. The decisions made in those classified meetings 46 years ago continue to influence how we approach space exploration today. Every Mars mission that launches now carries echoes of that abandoned program, and every international cooperation in space reflects Carter's belief that humanity's greatest achievements should be shared, not competed for. Perhaps most remarkably, several of the key technologies developed for Red Dawn are finally being implemented in current Mars mission plans. SpaceX's Raptor engines use principles similar to Martinez's ion drives. NASA's Artemis program incorporates life support systems based on Red Dawn designs. The psychological training for Mars crews follows protocols first developed for Walsh's team. As we stand on the verge of finally achieving what Red Dawn set out to accomplish 4 decades ago, we can only wonder how different our world might have been if that September night at Camp David had gone differently. Would we be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the first Martian colony? Would Earth's environmental crises have been solved using technologies developed for Martian survival? Or would we be dealing with the legacy of an interplanetary Cold War that turned space exploration into an arena for conflict rather than cooperation? The truth is, we'll never know for certain. But the story of Project Red Dawn teaches us that the path to Mars has always been about more than just technology and logistics. It's about the choices we make as a species, the values we prioritize, and the kind of future we want to create among the stars. So the next time you look up at that red dot in the night sky, remember that we almost lived there 45 years ago. And maybe, just maybe, we'll finally get there soon, carrying with us all the hard-won wisdom from the mission that almost changed everything.